are muted. Thank you, Kenny Havoc. Can you hear me now? Can you hear Billy Graham now? I can't hear you guys. Let's see what if this comes back up. Um,
So
but anyhow,
so it doesn't matter if you're having
yeah, it
throat
doesn't
spasms.
matter if I have to. If you can't hear me, you can't tell if I have throat spasms. Okay. But so I've had throat spasms. I've been having trouble talking. Okay.
It's almost like Kenny knows like instantaneously.
We want
Does
to
he
make
know
sure we
like
thank
right
Kenny.
before we go on?
Because according to this, we're good. We're popping up on the microphone. We're popping up on the microphone. I'm looking at why.
I
I
wonder
think
what.
Kenny is. I think we're still having technical difficulties. Let's see if we can. Yes, there we go. You are hurt. Thank you,
Well,
Kenny.
what did you change?
What I did is there was a red button. There's a red mute button. Okay. When I'm at home, I annoy the rest of the family. So whenever I do work on Beacon of Speech, I turn the mute button off. When I did the webcast, I didn't check to see if we were muted or not. I just checked to make sure that the green dots were here. So, sorry, Ted. Anyhow, uh, back to throat spasms. Point of the story is we're going to try and push through, see if throat spasms cut things short. These, yeah. All right. Kenny Havoc wants to know if we dressed up for anything for Halloween.
No, I didn't.
You didn't dress up for anything?
No, I just had my work uniform on.
Did anybody at your work dress up?
I'm a jaded blue collar guy.
Ted says he is jaded blue collar guy. When I went to work, I work with the children at the public school system. I wore a hockey jersey with Jason Voorhees and a lot of blood on it. They said you're not supposed to wear anything with blood on it. It scares the small children. I said okay, ignored them and kept along my workday. They also said you can't wear a mask. Okay, so I instead, you ever see a drama where they have a white mask next to a black mask?
Yeah.
It's supposed to be humor and tragedy.
Yeah.
Well, what happened is I wore a tragedy mask. Well, it's a black mask, right? So I'm wearing the Jason Voorhees hockey jersey and the black mask for tragedy, right? So I'm wearing it, and one of my coworkers comes up to me and he goes, "Hey," I said, "Yeah." He said, "You're wearing blackface." I'm like, "It's not blackface, it's tragedy. It's the dark colored mask for tragedy." And they're like, "Well, technically it's blackface." And I'm like, "Get the hell out of here. I'm going to wear whatever I want."
Oh, so they were being serious?
Yeah, they were being serious. So I took off the blackface mask, and then that employee walked away from me. And then I took the blackface mask and I put it back on. And next time we're at a house, I'll show you the blackface mask. But it did not bother me because, again, in theory, my school district has a levy coming up on Tuesday. They said, "Well, if that levy doesn't pass, we might have to fire you." And I go,
"It is what it is."
And if it passes, but you can't hear, we might have to fire you. Okay? At some point, when the boy cries wolf enough times, right, you'd be like, "I'm here till I'm here. I'm here till I'm not." Right? And they don't like that answer either. Right? But so I dress up like Jason Voorhees with a black mask. Ted was a disgruntled blue collar employee. But let me tell you
that's what I go as every day.
So let me tell you a quick story. Me and Ted were talking about this before we started. In the background, right? Let me see if I can point it out. Right. Ooh, I'd be a terrible TV weatherman. You see that plant right there? Right there. Oh, right there. Right there. That plant right there. Okay. That plant, here's the story of that plant. Okay. My uncle used to live upstairs from my grandmother and let me start from the beginning. My grandparents lived in the southwest suburbs of Ohio. My uncle went to Vietnam, right, in 1969, right? When he was in Vietnam, I was born, okay? Uncle, when he was living upstairs in 1969, right, he accumulated a lot of plants. He had a bunch of plants, he had a bunch of books. Now, after Vietnam, he came and he moved out to the countryside, right? But he kept a lot of his stuff at his home, like a lot of parents do, or a lot of kids do when they move out from their parents' house. Well, my grandparents, because they never touched his room when he was in Vietnam, because they didn't know if he was going to come home or not, when he moved out to the countryside, they left his house or his room in Vietnam mostly intact. And sometimes he would come home and he would visit for the night, but he would go back out to his country home, right? Well, 40 years goes by, and my uncle had some plants in his room that my grandmother would put in there because she loved her plants, but she ran out of room to put. So she would put plants in my uncle's room, and when he would come home, he would water the plants, once every whatever, right? I know this is a boring story, but we'll come back to the point of the story. So I don't know what year that plant was bought, but it was sometime in the 1900s, whether it was 1989, 1992. That plant is over 30 years old. Well, what happened is my grandmother died, and then my grandfather, right, he started to have dementia issues, right? So I would go over to my grandparents' house, and I go in my uncle's room, and it's untouched from the 60s. And I'd look over, and that plant's still alive. I'm like, how the hell is that plant alive? And I would touch it, and the dirt was like sand, right? And I'm like, Jesus Christ, it is literally a miracle that this plant is alive. Well, when my parents started to empty out the house, there's all these dead plants in my uncle's room, and they're all desert plants, so I don't even know what it is. And they're like, do you want that plant? It's free. I said, well, sure, it's a cool plant, and we'll give it a second chance of life, right? So we give it the second chance of life. We take it to my house. And you know what likes to eat that plant right there?
Cats?
Cats! The cats that I own. So they start beating on it. So that plant literally went from the desert of not being watered for a year on end to cats trying to eat it every day. So I took the plant, I put it in the bathroom, in the shower, where the drain
So
is
that's
blocked.
why all those plants are in the bathroom, because of the cats?
Yes. And so the plant is in the bathroom, in the shower, because the drain doesn't work. Well, now the bathroom, there's no natural lighting, right? So the plant is still not thriving. It is literally surviving in my bathroom. So I would turn on the shower head and I would water it once every 3 or 4 days. But I wouldn't water it too much because the drain is blocked, right? And then during the summer, I would take the plant outside. And then during the winter, I'd take it back and put it in the bathroom, right? Well, all of a sudden, in the last 2 years, I don't know what the hell happened, but that plant started to take off. New growth everywhere. It started to sprout. See all that new growth on the base? That's all within the last year. That plant has doubled in size in the last 2 years. And all it wants to do is live, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I brought it over here because now the bathroom drain is fixed. And I'm afraid to put it back with the cats because the cats are going to love all that new growth on it. So this plant that's over 30 years old, it might even be 40 years old, it has literally just existed until last year or two. And I love it, right? But I don't want to torture it anymore. So I'm sending it over to Ted's house where, if you look, there's natural light. And Ted has no cats. Now, Ted, we don't want to talk about your cats right now. But it is representative of it just wanted to live. And it may have taken 20 or 30 or 40 years to thrive. But look, it's starting to thrive. And there's a few dead spots. And I know I'm not supposed to walk away from the camera. But that is new. All of this is new. This is new. This is new. This is new. And
it looks like Baker's looking at it.
There's what?
Baker's looking at it.
Yeah, Baker's looking at it. So I put that I put that there for symbolism. Now, Ted, we might have to move it. We might have to move it on the table or whatever. But it symbolizes right now we exist. One day we are going to
So we're
survive.
like that plant?
Yeah. Now, if that plant dies, we're screwed. Like if I come over in 2 weeks and you're like, Fred, your plant died.
It'll probably be dead by the
I'll
end
be
of the
like, yeah.
show.
I'm like, oh no, we're done for. But that's a living representation of us. Now, my uncle is still alive, but at the end of the day, he didn't really care about the plant. He didn't care if it get thrown in the garbage or if I took it or whatever. Every once in a while, I sent pictures of my parents. I said, "You remember that plant?" Right? So it just needed the right environment to thrive.
And it spent most of its life locked in a room by itself.
Locked in a room by itself. Now, there were a couple of jade plants.
That's another similarity.
Well, and that's the thing. There were a couple of jade plants in there, but jade plants are desert plants. You could leave them out there for a year. And jade, I don't think that thing is supposed to be left unwatered for a year at a time. And again, that's why it didn't grow. And that's why, if you look, it grows in a weird direction because it grew towards where the light was.
Yeah.
So anyhow, the best way to aggravate listeners and people who are watching is to talk about plants for an hour and a half. But I just want to say that's a living representation. So I might not be able to talk, I might not be able to hear, but one day we're going to thrive like that plant, right? Or it'll die a gruesome death later. The thing we really want to talk about today is predictions, okay? Last Beacon of Speech show, and I'm sorry I have to drink on air, but I am trying to keep my voice from tearing up. The last time we were on air, I said that Putin was going to nuke America by the end of the year. Ted said he doesn't think so. Ted, oh, God damn it, Ted. That's going to happen. Write it down. Right around the election, so Putin is nuking something.
You think it's going to be us?
Oh, no. I think what Putin is going to do, he's going to do a test. There's an island in Norway where it's half Norway, half Russia. I think he's going to do a test there, or he's going to test, where the Ukrainians are in Russia, where they got a small. I think he's going to nuke there, or he might nuke Donetsk or Luhansk in Ukraine. And he said, and it's going to happen. Okay. Now you could say maybe he's just going to do a nuclear test to show who's boss.
Now the thing is that does that count?
Well, and that's what I was just going to say. Does that count? Say he goes to Siberia and he does a nuclear test. Does that count as using a nuke? Well, Fred would say, hell yeah, I was right. Ted would say, well, you didn't really use a nuke. We have tested thousands of nuclear weapons on our own land. We used to test them in Nevada every 10 minutes.
But when was the last time we did that?
I believe it was after Vietnam. I think that the last time we tested would have to be 1972, 74-ish. Okay. And I pointed at that plant. But if every nation in the world has agreed not to test nukes, so what happens if Putin runs a test in Siberia, right? And then he turns around and he does it the day before the election and says, listen, if you vote for Kamala Harris, this one is going to Ukraine tomorrow. Well, too late. 72 million people have already voted, Ted, because they're afraid of election day violence, right? So even if Putin uses a nuke, would that be enough to sway the American election? And that's my question to you. Do you think that would even work?
If he uses a nuke. I would say yeah.
So Ted thinks that a nuke could sway the election. Okay.
But you know what's funny though? I'm not sure in what direction.
Well, and that's the whole thing. So Ted said the main thing we're going to do is we are going to do predictions for the election. So I'm going to start writing them down, okay? And I'm going to, you know what, I won't write down over here. I'll write on my lap, okay? Fred, I really think that Kamala Harris is going to win by a landslide.
Wow.
Okay? Because I'm going to tell you, I keep looking at the polling numbers, and in the battleground states, she keeps moving to 1 to 2 points ahead, right? Ahead. Like just this morning, she's ahead in Iowa. She should never be ahead in Iowa. That should be Trump country. 100%.
Well, that's not a battle. That's not a.
Well, and that's the thing. States that aren't even battleground states are turning into battleground states. So I think that Harris is going to win in a landslide. Now I turn to Ted. Ted, what do you think is going to happen on Tuesday?
Oh, man, I am really torn. I used to be relatively sure about, what was going to happen up until really 2020 and COVID and everything just completely threw everything off. But I know I have to make a choice here. I'm still going to go with Trump.
Okay, Ted is torn, but he is saying Trump. Now, this is what I'm aggravated with, and I'm writing an article right now, and I'll promote my Beacon of Speech.
Now, are we going to make predictions on the Electoral College?
Oh, yeah. We'll do that too. So, go ahead. Give me 1 second. Let me write that down so I don't forget. But the point of the story is that right now there's people on the left, and I read article after article that says that Donald Trump is like Hitler, okay? Donald Trump is not one bit like Hitler, not one bit, okay? All these people who are telling you that Trump is Hitler is trying to scare you. I'm looking directly in the camera. All they're trying to do is scare you because you're stupid. If you think Trump is Hitler, go put yourself in a mental institution and say, I am retarded. Because he's not, okay? Donald Trump cares about one thing. Donald Trump cares about Donald Trump. Ted and me talk about this all the time, okay? Donald Trump is not some evil mastermind, okay? Donald Trump is about Donald Trump, and I'll let you respond.
Well, you know what's funny is I have heard that argument that Donald Trump only cares about Donald Trump.
Yeah.
And I'm like, and how is that different from everybody else?
Well, but that's where I'm going.
It's like he's the guy for this country.
And that's where I'm going with this. Kamala Harris, Ted Coley would say Kamala Harris is only about Kamala Harris. Okay.
A politician who only cares about himself.
Right.
Wow.
Oh, yeah. So let me go back to Donald Trump as Hitler. Okay. The same people who say Donald Trump is Hitler also say that Donald Trump is in the throngs of mental decline. Barack Obama last week said that Donald Trump was wearing adult diapers. Okay. Did you hear that?
You know why they're saying that?
Right.
Because that's what people say about the guy on their side.
Right. When they were talking about Biden. So now, but here's my problem with this. You cannot be Hitler and a guy who is in such throngs of cognitive decline that you're pooping your own pants. You cannot be both things. You just cannot be. Okay? There is no dictator in the history of the world who was pooping in his pants and was invading countries successfully and circumventing election law. Yeah. Now, you might say go back to Stalin or Lenin. There's pictures of Lenin where at the end, he's in a wheelchair, he's got his arms like this, and he's like this, and syphilis had ravaged his brain. Well,
so that's what happened with him. Yeah. That's how he.
And so with Lenin, okay, he was not the revolutionary he was in 1917. People were saying Lenin was a genius and we want to carry on Lenin's work. Lenin himself, or just poop my pants, right? He was not guiding the hand of Russia or the Soviet Union as he was dying. And you know when Lenin died? He died in his 70s. So Lenin was already dead. Hitler was already dead. Stalin was already dead by the time they hit 78 years old. All of them.
Oh,
okay? Donald Trump is still eating cheeseburgers, hopping on jets, dodging bullets, right? Whoa, I'm so in good shape. I'm alive. I'm the healthiest 78-year-old there ever was, right? Donald Trump is not Hitler, and he's not Lenin pooping his pants, ravaged with syphilis, okay? Now, let's go back to Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris, at the end of the day, Ted is right. What politician is not about themselves, okay? Kamala Harris is all about getting elected. How do I smile for the camera and use word salad? What do you believe in? I believe in an America where everybody is an American. Well, what the fuck does that mean?
A way forward.
Yeah. And she talks in cliches. But Ted would say all politicians talk in cliches. What happens is that the media comes at Trump and says, when you say this, what do you mean? Blah, blah, blah. When the media goes to Kamala Harris and she goes, America's for Americans, nobody said, well, what does that mean, Kamala Harris? They're like, she's brilliant. She's a genius. You need to listen. She doesn't talk in a whole sentence. I make more sense than Kamala Harris. And so when Ted says all politicians care about is themselves, he is fundamentally correct. How do I get elected? How do I stay in power? How do I keep in power? But what happens is with Donald Trump, his enemies turn him inside out, and Kamala Harris's enemies are like, she doesn't say anything. What is she really going to do to fix America? Well, that's boring. That's not fun. You can't put headlines on America is America, right? Well, when you hold her feet to the fire, well, don't you believe in America? And the whole thing, every time I listen to Kamala Harris, it's all cliches and no nuts and bolts. How would we do this? Now, you could come back at me. I voted Libertarian. I'm going to tell you who I voted for. I voted yesterday for Chase Oliver, the Libertarian. Okay? Chase Oliver believes in abolishing the income tax, right?
I don't even know who that is.
Well, earlier this week, Donald Trump said, you know what? I would think about abolishing the income tax. Well, guess what, Donald Trump? If you ran as Libertarian, that could be your platform. That is a real platform. Now, Ted, you might say abolishing the income tax doesn't work. But now we are talking about not whether he wears adult diapers or he has a spray tan. We are talking about nuts and bolts. How do you run the country? Now, he was tossing it out there. I don't believe he really believes in abolishing the income tax. But he is talking policy. Ted, when is the last time you watched Kamala Harris and you heard her talking about policy? It doesn't happen. We have to protect America from that orange man who says mean things. And he does. He says idiotic, crazy things. But at the end of the day, the Democrat side says idiotic, crazy things, right? And you're like, oh, well, blah, blah, blah. So let me give you an example.
Really, in my opinion, the only thing that matters is what their policies are or what they're going to be.
Right.
And does anybody even know what their policies are?
Well, and that's the whole thing. So I keep saying the left, they keep saying the right doesn't believe in science. Well, what do they mean by that? When they say that the right doesn't believe in climate change. Now, listen, climate change is real, okay? Ted, I'm telling you, climate change is real. 100%. You can't argue it, okay? You can't, okay? But you know what's been happening for 200 years?
Climate change.
Climate change. So what happened is in the late 1800s, America built coal-burning plants, and they chucked so much pollution into the air in places like Pittsburgh and Cleveland, you couldn't see the sun. Do you remember being a kid in the 1970s and they had smog days? Do you remember those?
Well, my brother brings up how, like, you couldn't even see downtown from.
You couldn't see
we weren't that
downtown.
far from.
Yeah, you couldn't see downtown from the highway because the smog was so bad.
Right.
Well, why is the smog so bad? Because human beings, Fred and Ted, and our generation took coal, took pollutants, and chucked them into the air and say, once they're in the air, it's not our problem.
Well, you know what's funny? A few years ago, I went to see Roger Daltrey
Right.
at Blossom, and he was talking about coming to like Cleveland back in the '60s,
Right.
with the Who, and he goes, there was 2 inches of soot over everything.
Yes, the soot. There used to be soot on the cars in Cleveland. Okay, this was the 70s. There were articles in Newsweek in the 70s. You can look it up. They said, if we keep polluting the air, you know what's going to happen? What's going to happen, Ted?
Climate change.
New ice age.
Yeah.
So what they did is the government said, listen, if you don't put filters on your smokestacks, we're going to put you out of business. So what the companies did is they put giant filters on the smokestacks, and they said only 0.001% of the pollutants can come. And they're like, that's going to put us out of business. Imagine our friend Steve. That's going to put us out of business. You know how much it costs to change that filter every day? Well, guess what? It didn't put them out of business. You know what put them out of business? What happened is the Chinese said, oh, well, we don't care about climate change. We'll build these factories that will pollute the hell out of the air, and we will not give our people a cost of living, right? So instead of paying people like Fred Hunt or Ted Coley 80 grand a year, we're going to pay our Chinese people $5 grand a year.
So nothing has changed.
No.
You just move the problem.
Yeah, they moved the problem.
Which is what always happens with everything now.
So right now, if we eliminated everything in America, you know what wouldn't change? Climate change, because now China has all these giant plants that fill the air with pollutants, right? So the first step in order to stop climate change is to change what's in China. Ted, let me tell you something. I'm going to give you $1 billion right now. Ted, you have $1 billion, okay? You have $1 billion in your pocket. And this will probably be the last week of the speech. Can you change anything that's going on in China with that $1 billion in your pocket?
No.
Nope. There is literally nothing you can do. Now, can the president make the Chinese president not pollute anymore? How? A Chinese president, how can we make it worth your while not to pollute the air? And the Chinese president says, F you in Chinese, whatever that is. We're China. We have 1 billion people. We have different needs. We have to do certain things that you don't do, right? So back to Kamala Harris. We elect Kamala Harris. What does she do to stop climate change? Well, I'm going to spend $100 billion to do a carbon neutral program in America. Well, guess what? That will not work. It doesn't matter if you have 100 billion or 200 billion. Nothing you do in America will stop what's going on in China. And to make things even worse, do you know who's supposed to pass America in the next 10 years?
China.
India. China's number one right now when it comes to pollution. Number two is going to be India. You know who hates us? India calls us the arrogant Americans. Calls us the arrogant Americans, right? So back to Kamala Harris.
Sometimes I call us that.
Back to Kamala Harris. What can she legit do besides spending our money on programs that won't work, right? Now, back in the old days, let's go back to the 60s, back to when the plant was living in the desert. Do you remember when we used to send people to the moon? Do you remember when we used to send the Challenger spaceship up and then it would come and land? We don't do that anymore. Why don't we do that, right? Because they said, well, why are you wasting all that money on space exploration when you should be taking care of the poor? Now you have government handouts. Now it's not a one-for-one, right? Because now they say, well, we don't want to have the government in the space race. We want to privatize that, right? But now, where is your money being spent? Kamala Harris, I want to know where you're going to spend all of our money, right? Now, this is what you're not going to like. Donald Trump, when he was in charge, did Donald Trump spend more or less money from the time he took office to the time he left office?
Wait a minute, what's the question?
When Donald Trump took office in his first term, did he spend more money or did he spend less money from the day he took office until the day he left office?
Probably more.
More. His budgets went up. And then Joe Biden, he took office and the budgets kept going up.
Yeah.
Now, let's say you believe in limited government, okay? Don't vote for Donald Trump or vote for Kamala Harris. You vote for Chase Oliver. Well, why don't you vote for Chase Oliver? Chase Oliver believes in taking budgets down. Well, because if you vote for Chase Oliver, you are putting that crook Donald Trump in office or that communist Kamala Harris. And you see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. It's not about ideas. And now you are voting for personalities. Who has a nicer personality? Well, it shouldn't matter what personality it is. What is your platform? What are you running for? Kamala Harris is running on the platform, vote for me, I am nice. What's your policy? I will bring multiculturalism to America. Well, guess what? America's already multicultural, okay? You got two old white guys with beards, okay? I am not voting for Donald Trump. You're voting for Donald Trump because you like the way he tells it as it is. Neither one of us are voting for him because he's white. If you listen to CNN, they say the only reason to vote for Trump is if you're white. Well, guess what? I didn't vote for Donald Trump, okay? But I'm also not voting for Kamala Harris because I don't care. I'm going to take my hands. I don't care what you look like. What is your policy? And we are voting for two people. When Kamala Harris, when her boss was in office, things are out of control. Do you remember when Ross Perot used to talk about budgets, about balancing the budget? Do you hear Donald Trump talking about that balancing the budget?
That's the funny thing is neither side even brings.
They don't even bring it up anymore. And Kamala Harris says, I'm a woman. I don't even care, right? I want to try balancing a checkbook, right? So back to predictions, I think that the mainstream media and the media on whole has brainwashed a lot in this country, a lot of people in this country, that Donald Trump is literally the devil, that he has horns coming out of his head. If you vote for him again, he's going to come rape your daughter, or he's going to put your black son or daughter in a concentration camp.
Well, you know what's ridiculous about that is that he was already president for 4 years and he didn't do those things.
And Ted, that's exactly right. I keep reading about people who are getting ready to leave. They're like, I don't want to be put in a concentration camp. There are no concentration camps. He was president for 4 years. There are no camps. Okay? And if you want to get into nitty-gritty, if you want to go to policy, right? People were incarcerated at about a 0.5% rate, okay? Throughout American history from the year 1900 till around the year 1970, okay? During the 80s and 90s, the incarceration rates went up. And then it said, you are incarcerating minorities at a disproportionate rate.
And almost all of that was drug related, right?
And when it went to 1% of the population, do you know who the president was? Ted Coley. Do you know who's the president?
Wait a minute. Don't tell me. Who was president?
When we hit 1% incarceration rates. Clinton. What team was Bill Clinton on? What Bill Clinton did was he talked out of one side of his mouth, and on the other side of the mouth, he appeased people by jailing more citizens than he should have. We should not be at the 1% incarceration rate. Now, Barack Obama noticed this. He goes, all of our black young men are languishing in prison. We need to change the laws. Who was Barack Obama's vice president? I already answered the question. It's Joe Biden. Did they lower the incarceration rates?
No.
What?
No.
No, they did not. They said they wanted to, but they didn't. So now we're back at Donald Trump will have concentration camps. Well, guess what? Part of the reason that we're at the 1% incarceration rate, Bill Clinton, Barack Obama, Joe Biden, okay? Those are real issues. Now, Kamala Harris is going to talk out of both of her sides of her mouth because she wants to get elected, but she's a former prosecutor. Do you think the incarceration rates are going to come down under Kamala Harris? She is going to talk to her minority voters and say, you should not be in prison. And then on the other hand, she's going to keep putting minorities in prison in order to get elected and reelected. Does that make sense? So now that we're talking about boring policy, right? Kamala Harris does not, I want to hear her plan for reducing incarceration rates for minorities. Now, some people would say defund the police. No. That's not how you do it. You do it on the opposite end, okay? If you are compassionate, the way to drop incarceration rates is to increase mental health programs. Okay, now Ted Coley and me can disagree. Ted Coley can say that is a waste of money. Okay. In my head, if your percentage is 1% and you want to get incarceration rates down to 0.25%, you should raise your mental health programs to 0.25% to make up some of the people who aren't incarcerated. Now, you can tear into my plan, because I don't have it in front of me, I don't have it written down, but they're big picture ideas. Kamala Harris doesn't even have big picture ideas. You see what I'm saying? And now Ted would say, I am going to run under the policy, lock them up, throw away the key. Okay? Now, if you remember, Donald Trump says, I'm going to put people in jail, right? Well, who's he going to put? He's not going to put you in jail. He's not going to put me in jail. He's not going to put the editor of CNN in jail. If you commit a crime, he's going to put you in jail and say, we don't care about your mental health. Don't do the crime if you can't do the time. Now, Ted, you can believe in that, and I'm not going to argue with you. What I'm going to say is that is your policy. Donald Trump believes if you do the crime, you should do the time. Ted Coley would be like, I agree with Donald Trump. Criminals should be incarcerated, right? That is a real policy. Me and you can argue whether it's fair or what the incarceration, but it's not a platitude. It's not people shouldn't be in jail. Okay, well, what should we do instead? And you wave your hands and you say, America's America, and I believe in Jesus, or I believe in this or that. No. What is your platform? And not mention what your platform is. Now, I want to circle back to Kamala Harris, why I think it's going to be a landslide. I think that the media has scared so many people into believing that Donald Trump is going to put them in camps, that Donald Trump is pooping his pants, that Donald Trump is going to rape your daughter and put your son in prison, depending on what color he is. The media has really turned into an extension of the Democrat Party, which is very dangerous.
Yeah.
You cannot have a media that holds one party's feet to the fire and then tells lies on the other end. We are in a very dangerous spot in America. Now, if Glenn Beck was here, he would come running out of the other room and he could be like, Fred Hunt is exactly right. I'm not voting for Donald Trump and again, this is wrong too. I'm not voting for Donald Trump because I agree with his policies. I'm voting for Donald Trump to stop the left. Now, this is where we get into things with Ted Coley. Ted Coley also believes in voting for Donald Trump to stop the left because they are insane. Okay? But Ted also knows what Donald Trump's policies are, right? He, even though he does certain things, at the end of the day, Ted Coley would say, I agree that this Supreme Court justice was you see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. You could name some policies, and we don't want to grind it down because we have to make our predictions, okay? But I think that people are scared of Trump, legit scared of him, okay? And that's why I think it's going to be a landslide. I think that Kamala Harris is going to win 330, and I'll give you need 270 to win. Mm-hmm. So I think she's going to win 330 to about 210. Because I think Americans are afraid. And what they should be afraid of is the Kamala Harris presidency. Because hopefully when Donald Trump moves on, I am hoping that somebody is going to say, we are not going to turn into a communist state under Kamala Harris. You're either voting for communism with Kamala or you're voting for capitalism with me, meaning whoever the candidate is in 2028, whether it be Mark Cuban or whatever. So what is your prediction?
Well, Donald Trump will win, and it'll be 274 to 264. I think that works out.
274 to 264.
Because it's 538.
I'm sorry?
538. Is that
Yep. Yep.
So does that work?
Yeah, that's right. So let me
274 to
now I don't want to
264.
I don't want to speak for you. Okay. We want to take away the white and black thing. Okay. Again, we're going to cover a face. Okay. Ted thinks that the American people are smarter than to vote for Kamala Harris. Would you say that's fair?
Well, see, that's the thing. I mean,
that's the thing. Right
I'm saying that, but I'm
right there.
I don't know, man. I just don't. I used to feel like I knew what was going on.
Well, and
it's like now I have very little idea what people are actually thinking.
I put Ted Coley on the spot for a reason. Okay. There are a lot of people who just don't know. Ever since COVID, up is down, down is up. If you would have told me that Donald Trump was going to expand everything and be all things, all people, and the deficit would grow exponentially under his presidency, I'd be like, no, it's not. He's a businessman. He knows better. You know what I mean? But it didn't happen. And go ahead.
I think that over the last 50 to 100 years, this government has gotten so big that it doesn't matter who's in there. It's just a monster.
Right. And that's the whole thing. Right now, Ted hit the nail on the head. Fred, why are you a libertarian? The government is too big. Kamala Harris is nothing but an actor. Donald Trump is nothing but an actor. They're both politicians that say what they need to say to get elected. Now, you're like, Donald Trump isn't a politician. He has been the president. He has run a second term. He is now more politician than businessman. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. He has become what he hates. Okay. And me and you talk about Howard Stern all the time. Howard Stern used to be the common man. He literally became everything that he railed against. Everything. And Donald Trump, it's funny because Howard Stern came out and said that Donald Trump doesn't have any brains, and he literally became everything he hated. And which is funny coming from Howard Stern because that is literally what happened to Howard Stern. He became everything that he hated. And go ahead.
Well, I think there's a lesson in that. A lot of times what pisses you off is what you see in yourself.
Right. And so now, again, me and Ted don't have any money. No offense to your decor, but you can see we are not in a castle, right? We're talking about a 40-year-old plant in the background.
Can't even afford a new plant.
Right.
You have to get a used plant.
Somebody has to say the government is too big. Okay. That person to me is Chase Oliver. Nobody else is saying the government. Kamala Harris is saying, how can we help you? 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 Ted Coley works for a living. I work for a living. Okay. The businessman in this country does not respect the working man. The people in charge of businesses, how can we screw the working man? How can we pay them less? How can we not have a union? Right? And at the same time, the government is like, well, we'll just pay you to do nothing. Right? Well, guess what? I would like to be paid to do nothing, but somebody has to work. Somebody has to make the food that you eat or build the house that you live in. Well, the Democrats would say, well, somebody will do that. Well, who's going to do that? Me and Ted talk about it all the time. Somebody has to drive the truck that brings you your food, right? You should pay that person a living wage. Now, we're not talking about a certain living wage mandated by the government. Your company should be like, we're all in this together. Do you get the feeling that at your company that you're all in this together? No. So now, because companies are a-holes and they exploit the worker, people run to the government. The problem is that the government is too big and unwieldy. They're like, we'll give you a check, just leave us alone. Because that's too unwieldy. What you need to do, right, and it'll never happen in our lifetime. It'll happen one day because it'll become untenable, okay? The government will not have enough money to pay people not to work. And companies are
Did you say it will happen in our lifetime?
No, after we're dead. Okay? That's coming sooner for me than it is for you. The government does not have enough money to pay people to not work forever.
Yeah.
And the same thing is, if you're running a company and you're being subsidized by the government, at some point, government subsidies are going to end. So now the company I used to work for and you work for now, if they didn't have government contracts, would you exist in the city you work in, do you think?
Oh, I'm not sure. I don't know.
What the government has done for your place of business is you are an extension of the government, right?
Yeah, I'm sure we do have.
And if the government canceled all their contracts with you, probably don't have enough business to exist, right? So now...
Well, that's probably true of most big businesses.
Well, and that's the whole thing. Now you're coming back into...
And which goes back to the government is too big.
The government is too big, and you reinvigorate the private sector. Now, once you reinvigorate the private sector, now you worry about companies becoming too big. Well,
it's so hard to stop that because it's like it's got its tentacles in everything.
Well, and that's the whole thing. So now, if the government pulls out of the private sector, in theory, the private sector, if something is cheaper, someone can do it for cheaper. The bigger companies keep getting bigger because they buy small companies and they're subsidized by the government. That's how monopolies are made, right? In theory, if you have a bunch of little companies and they undercut the big companies become, right now, the government has been subsidizing companies like banks and saying they're too big to fail, subsidizing large companies because they're too big to fail. What they're doing is they're picking winners and losers in capitalism. That's all they're doing. Once you shrink the government, they can't pick winners and losers in capitalism. Why do they like picking winners and losers in capitalism? Because now they control the private sector. You see what I'm saying? You shrink the government. In the short term, big companies grow, but in the long term, they shrink because then they get undercut if they're not getting government subsidies. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. But that won't happen in our lifetime. What's going to happen is places run out of money, and then people get bored, and then one day there will be a revolt. Right? It won't be today, it won't be tomorrow. But after I'm dead, and maybe after you're dead, you're going to live a lot longer than me. So, but when it comes back to the predictions, we got these predictions, right? For the election this week.
Are you like pretty confident about that prediction? Are you?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. You really are?
Yeah.
Because I'm not confident about mine.
I think that people.
But even if I went the other way, I wouldn't be confident about that. Well, that's what I'm saying. It's like I feel like I don't know. I don't have my finger on the pulse of anything anymore.
Right. I have told the story over and over.
Maybe that just means I'm getting old.
I have told the story over and over. When Hillary Clinton ran against Donald Trump, the day before I read the polls, and there were 15 top pollsters in America, right? 13 of them said Hillary in a landslide. The 14th one said Hillary easily. The 15th poll said too close to call. The day after the election, everybody was wrong. Everybody. I went back to those websites to take screenshots because it was the first year of Beacon of Speech. Guess what? They erased all their predictions. Now I can't prove it. Do you see what I'm saying? Yeah. And they're like, oh, nobody said Hillary in a landslide. Everybody said Hillary in a landslide. The difference is that Donald Trump, and we're going to get into this too. Donald Trump was 8 years younger. Okay, Donald Trump was everywhere. He's dancing. He's doing the jig, right? Donald Trump was an attractive man. Okay, Donald Trump, 8 years later, I've seen pictures of him where he doesn't do a spray tan. He was too tired to do the spray tan. I look better than Donald Trump. Okay, Donald Trump is in here. I have hair. Okay, they're publishing pictures of Donald Trump, and you can see his comb over, right? And people are like, he's going bald. Yeah, no crap, he's going bald. He's had a comb over for 20 years. But the first time around, they weren't publishing those pictures. You see what I'm saying? And so now there are.
But when you think about it, okay, even if he is going bald, what does that have to do with anything?
Well, but that's the whole thing. Me and you
I'm not voting for him. He's going bald.
Me and you are engaged, but there's literal people who go, holy cow, that guy looks awful.
What are you crazy? You're voting for a bald guy.
And that's the whole thing. So I feel like we have really sucked the air out of the room on this. So I apologize. Even Kenny got tired of us, right? Kenny jumped off. He's like, I'm tired of you too. Okay. But basically, at the end of the day, we're a free speech website. I can say, I don't like Trump. I don't like his policies. I can say Kamala Harris. I don't like her. I don't like her policies. No matter what, I am not worried about going to jail next week. If Harris is elected, I'm not worried about going to jail. If Trump is elected, I am not worried about going to jail. So go ahead.
No, I was just to say it's nothing to do with that, but I was just thinking back on like earlier episodes, like the difference in the way we look.
Oh, yeah.
It's like back then we looked like semi-young. Yeah. Now we look like those guys on the cough drop.
Yeah, now we look like hermits, like we came up off the hill. And like I said, I keep taking just tiny sips of water. My throat is, Ted doesn't know it, but my throat is raw as can be. Again, back to the Billy Graham analogy at the end. I'll probably be coughing the rest of the day.
Yeah, now we look like Ulysses S. Grant and Benjamin Harrison or something.
Well, but that's the whole thing. In the old days, they didn't care. You would take the train across the United States and say this was a platform. I don't believe in Washington, D.C. I do believe in Washington, D.C. The government needs to help us. The government doesn't need to help us. What I don't understand, and I want to be clear, Glenn Beck is 100% right. Glenn Beck is almost a prophet, okay? Libertarian leaning Fred, why does the government exist? The government exists to build roads, to make sure there's schools, and to make sure in a natural disaster you are taken care of. Okay, Glenn Beck would say, hey, Libertarian Fred, how's that working out for you? Are the schools better than they were a generation ago? No, they're not. They're worse. Okay, that's not me talking. That's scores of the students' education scores. Are the roads in better shape than they were 50 years ago? No, they're not. They're not in better shape. And the third thing is Asheville was underwater. FEMA didn't even go. They said, we don't have any money. Well, what'd you do with the money? Well, we gave it to all the illegal immigrants. Kamala Harris, people should literally be throwing rocks at her saying, why did you give our money to illegal immigrants when people in Asheville are literally dying in the streets? And they're like, well, they're not literally dying. And no. They have no house. You know what I mean? They have no house. There's floodwaters and they're living in the wreckage of their own homes. And those are Americans that paid taxes. And that's why the government exists in case of emergency. Yeah. Well, we ran out of money because it was too close to the other emergency. No. Illegal immigration is not an emergency. You build the wall, they don't come. Now there's no illegal immigration emergency. You can't say, well, we ran out of money because the illegal immigration emergency. You see what I'm saying? Well, then maybe instead of doing other things, we need more money for emergencies. You see what I'm saying? What is your policy on FEMA? And then Kamala Harris would say, FEMA exists because it's part of the government. And you'd be like, well, that didn't answer the question at all, right? Does she lay out policy how FEMA is going to help Americans?
This might sound kind of weird, but it's funny how a country that's $35 trillion in debt say they're running out of money. Isn't your whole MO running out of money?
That's the whole thing. You circle it back. In theory, we have no money for anything.
Yeah.
They're like, we need to take in 10 million immigrants. No. Anything, we should deport 10 million people who aren't citizens, right? Now, if I was running for office, they'd be like, Fred hates 10 million minorities 6 weeks. I got no plan, right? But if you want to balance the budget, no more illegals until we balance the budget. Well, that's hate speech. Well, how are we going to balance the budget? Well, here's what we do. We pay reparations to every black American. No, that doesn't balance the budget.
It's almost like their whole goal is to run out of money, and then they go, "Oh my God, we're running out of money."
So let's throw out some ideas. Me and you run for president. Well, guess what? Everybody has to pay their fair share. Whether you're a trillionaire, you don't get any more write-offs, right? And then if you're poor, you have to pay 10% of your income to the government. Well, they're poor. They shouldn't pay anything. Well, guess what? We're going to run out of money. All 300 million people are going to have to pay something. Well, how am I going to pay? Well, you're going to have to get a job. But that sucks. I don't want to work. Well, guess what? Everybody's thinking. At some point, everybody has to work. Yeah. Well, I don't want to work at that crappy Taco Bell job. Well, guess what? I didn't want to work at that crappy Taco Bell job. At some point, somebody has to say out loud, between 18 and 65, unless you have a debilitative illness, you have to work. Well, I don't want to work at a crappy job. Nobody wants to work at a crappy job. Everybody has to get a job. And in America, they're like, well, I don't want to work at a crappy job. I only want to work at a good job. Well, guess what? Say there's 100 million jobs. maybe there's 2 million good jobs and 98 million crappy jobs. Well, guess what? Now all of a sudden, go ahead.
Well, that's another thing. You know how they talk about AI, how it's going to eliminate
Yeah.
all the like manual jobs? I don't believe that.
Yeah.
Because crappy jobs never go away.
Right. Who is going to hand you your taco at Taco Bell?
Yeah.
Okay? Because I'm going to tell you right now, let's say all the Taco Bell workers are gone. I used to be a manager at Taco Bell. All the Taco Bell workers are gone. And you're like, where's my 3 tacos? Somebody has to hand you your 3 tacos. And they're like, oh, no, nobody has to be there. Well, guess what? There's a lot of people who will be like, no one's here. Well, I'm just going to go behind the counter and make 5 more tacos. I just got a whole pile of tacos. You're learning that because 5 years ago, they said, well, we're just going to make everybody scan their own stuff and do self-registers. Well, a lot of people are like, well, guess what? I'm just not going to scan everything. I'll save money. And Walmart's like, you're stealing from us. And I'm like, well, I save money. That's all you're doing by eliminating cashiers and saving money.
Yeah, so we're both trying to save money.
Yeah, so you save money, but I also save money because I just scan 8 of 10 items, right?
So that's a big problem, right? People are doing that a lot.
A lot of people are doing that. And I even joke around about it when I'm at Walmart. And it's funny because back to AI.
And nobody saw that coming.
Oh, I think they should have seen it coming. But Crystal, my wife, she'll be scanning. I'll be like, if you want to save money, just don't scan the expensive things, right? Ha ha. Me and her on camera, we're watching the camera at Walmart, just like me and you are watching each other. And all of a sudden, guess what? Here comes a Walmart worker in a vest. Hey, you guys doing okay over here? And so apparently Walmart has some sort of, if you say certain words or if you do certain actions, the Walmart employee avoids you like the plague. They don't want to talk to you, right? But all of a sudden you make a joke about not scanning everything. One shows up over your shoulder in the vest. Oh, hey, what can I do for you?
So the moral of the story is don't say anything.
Yeah, don't say anything.
Keep doing what you're doing, but don't say anything.
Yeah, and that's why I do beacon speech, because I can't shut my mouth, right? Because I'm too stupid, right? Just steal the stuff and leave. Don't say, oh, hey, it would be funny if we can scan the most expensive item, and here comes a Walmart employee. And so, but no.
Why don't they have that guy working a register instead of watching and listening? It's like, how about just working the register?
Yeah, and that's the whole thing. Just work the register. But Ted, it goes back to, okay, everybody cannot have a good job. Everybody cannot have the good job. Somebody has to have the crappy jobs. Well, nobody wants to do the crappy jobs. We'll have AI do the crappy jobs. Well, guess what? You know what AI could probably do better?
Even AI doesn't want to.
AI could probably be a better manager than it could be an employee.
Oh, I can't.
Yeah. So you know whose job AI is going to take. It's not going to be my crappy job or your crappy job. It's going to be our manager's crappy job, which means less white-collar jobs. AI will take more white-collar good jobs and not take more blue-collar jobs. And again, I cannot say this enough. When I was at Taco Bell in the 80s, right, when I was a teenager, my boss used to say it all the time. I can't wait for the robots to take your jobs. According to Taco Bell corporate, 5 to 10 years, Taco Bell is going to be all robots. When's the last time you went into Taco Bell? It was all robots. It's never happened.
Yeah.
Right? But I did go to Taco Bell 2 weeks ago. And I ordered, you'll get a kick out of this. You don't know this story. I ordered a number 7 meal, right? Hello. Hi. Can I take your order? Yeah, I need a number 7 meal.
Wait, is this the drive-through?
Yeah, drive-through. Number 7 meal. And it's quiet. And I go, yeah, I want a hard taco instead of a soft taco. And they're like, soft taco, 7 meal. And it's quiet, right? And they said, that will be $7.82 or whatever. Yeah, I want a Pepsi with that. That will be $8. Oh, no. Don't add on a Pepsi. I want the Pepsi that says in part of the number 7 meal. And then I hear a girl, and then a girl comes on. She goes, I'm sorry to interrupt. Did you say you wanted 1 Pepsi or 2 Pepsis? I just want 1 Pepsi with a number 7 meal. Okay, 782, pull around. Okay. And so I pull around and she's like, yeah, we're trying a new AI. Yeah, I know it's a new one. I used to run a Taco Bell, right? I only want 1 Pepsi with my number 7. Okay. So Taco Bell, they're trying to start it through the drive-thru. Now it's at the alpha level, right? Or the beta level or whatever it is. But they are still not where they need to go. Do you see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So the point of my story is that AI, in theory, is going to take away that drive-through job. Well, guess what? You're taking a crappy job away from a 17-year-old who still had to cut in order to get my order right. You see what I'm saying? At some point, the job that it's going to take away is the boss's job and just leave 18-year-olds to run Taco Bell. Now, Ted Coley, let me ask you a question. What happens if there's no 30-year-olds run the Taco Bell? They're all 18 years old, right? That Taco Bell is not going to be very motivated to get you your food. There's nobody yell at you. Listen, you can't let people curl around the building for an hour and only make tacos when you want. And they're like, well, who's going to stop us? AI program. Well, somebody has to review the AI program.
Get to work. Screw you.
Yeah. Make tacos. I'm going to hit the delete button, right? Well, and again, AI, how does AI threaten you? If you don't make tacos, well, we're not going to get paid. You don't pay me. You're not the boss. You're the AI program.
Arguing with the AI.
Yeah, you just tell us how many workers need to be here. I don't feel like working today, right? And my arm hurts, so I'm just going to make tacos at half speed. But you're not making tacos at half speed. So again, back to, how does it run?
Then they'll have to get like something like RoboCop to come in.
I think it was our friend Cliff. Cliff posted, right? Cliff posted, he said, AI is going in the wrong direction. AI eventually is going to be really good at business and art, management and art, but it's not going to be good. Give me a second the way he put it. It's not going to be good at things we need done, like laundry and dishes. It's going to be good at things we want to do. You know what I mean? Like art.
Yeah.
And I want to do art. I don't want AI to do my art. Well, Ted already knows I use AI for art just because I don't want to get sued. Okay? Because AI is non-copyrightable. Okay? So, and that way I use AI, I can't get sued. If I take a picture of Jeanette, right, that Jeanette has on her website and I use it, Jeanette can sue me. You see what I'm saying? I use AI to not get sued.
Wouldn't that be funny if she did?
Well, and that's the thing. One day, let's say I win the lottery. Me and Jan have a gentleman's agreement. You don't sue me and I use your art, right? I win the lottery. All of a sudden, I'm worth $1 billion. And Jan's like, I'm worth $1 million. I'm like, what? And she's like, oh, you give me $1 million for all the art I use, or else I'm going to sue you. Money changes everything, which goes back to the very beginning. Look at Ted, look at Fred. We are not in $1,000 suits. We are the working class, right? You do not see the working class represented very much anymore. And at the end of the day, okay, we're going to keep doing Beacon of Speech. One day it'll work. Because I'm telling you, the working class, the people who actually work, nobody cares about them. The right doesn't care about them because they're like, well, if you want to make more money, just work harder. Well, guess what? That doesn't work. And the left is saying, as long as you keep voting for us, we're going to keep giving you money. There is no more money. And Ted, I'm being dead serious here. Okay. I like to think that I'm a smart guy. I don't understand how America works trillions of dollars in debt.
No, I don't either.
I don't understand how we keep the doors open. Any other business You're slapping a sign on the door that says going out of business. America is done. Okay? At some point, you have to pay the piper.
Mm-hmm.
The only way you don't pay the piper is if the world does a reset. And Russia says, we don't want our money. China says, we don't want your money. Or America says, we're just not going to pay you. We're not in debt anymore. Right? At some point, you have to pay the piper.
Yeah.
And I don't
Yeah, I
understand
mean, if there is no point that you get to, then there's no such thing as gravity either. You know
well,
what I mean?
that's exact. Ted is right. Your school cannot run in negative numbers forever, or else they close your school. Your state, by law, has to have a balanced budget. But somehow the federal government can run trillions of dollars in debt, and somehow America's still here. We are at a point where the presidential race is almost absurd.
Yeah.
And nobody is talking about how does America exist.
Yeah.
Russia is also millions of dollars or trillions of dollars in debt. But what's happening is places like Georgia, not Georgia the state, but Georgia the Oblast or Republic, they're like, we don't want to be part of Russia anymore. We're just gonna break off and do revolution. I don't think America is close to revolution now, as close as Russia is to revolution, but America cannot keep spending into
oblivion.
Yeah, into the abyss. At some point, there has to be a reset. Okay? When there's a reset, there's going to be winners and losers. The losers.
What side do you think we'll be on?
Well, yeah, we're not going to be on the winner side. And that's another thing. Whenever people say, and this makes me very mad, whenever people say Fred and Ted have white privilege, I'd be like, no offense, Ted. This is our white privilege. How you don't understand what privilege means. And they're like, well, your mom and dad stayed married, right? That's white privilege. No, that's religion. Religion teaches mom and dad stay together, right? So if you want to say that white privilege is religion, you are now opening a whole new can of worms. But I wanted to keep it to an hour. I want to make sure I thank Kenny Havoc. Kenny Havoc was done with us. So hopefully we didn't get in too bad of a spot. I already got the song of the day. Song of the day is Working for the Weekend by Loverboy. Cliff used to say that song's the way life is. You work hard Monday through Friday, and then you have the weekends off. Well, guess what? Ted doesn't live that life. Ted's on call on the weekends. Ted has to work every third weekend. Cliff has to work mandatory overtime on the weekends. I don't know if you knew that or not. When it comes for working for the weekend, when you work at Walmart and your schedule is Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, you're not living for the weekend either. At some point, the workers who keep getting squeezed will revolt.
Well, adding on to what you were saying about, the debt in this country, I don't think it's going to matter big picture who gets elected. It's like you were just saying, it's out of control.
Well, that's the thing. That's why Kamala Harris.
I don't think there's going to be that much of a difference, big picture.
Well, and that's the thing. I think in a year, once Kamala Harris puts in policies that Barack Obama wanted to but wasn't able to, you are going to see America start to gag on debt from the top all the way to the bottom, whether it's my household or the federal government. There's, again, I can't say it enough. I keep saying paying the piper. You cannot run into this kind of debt. Now, you could be like, well, I'm not going to vote for a libertarian because they're going to try and balance the budget. I don't want anything cut. You got to do something. You cannot literally drown in debt.
Yeah. Yeah, and too many people are dependent on the government in one way or another.
Right.
Whether they're getting a government check or they're working for a government agency, you know what I mean?
Right.
The government's too big.
Ted, before we go, we did Song of the Day. Did you have anything you want to add?
No.
I'm Fred Hunt. That's Ted Coley. One day, we're going to be healthy. And when I say healthy, Ted's healthy, I'm not. But one day, Beacon of Speech is going to work.